Essex Junction Board of Trustees to order for Tuesday, August 25th. And do we have any agenda additions or changes for tonight?
Greg?
We do have one agenda addition from staff. It's a memo from Brad Luck. It's in reference to item 5B. The memo is entitled Personnel Regulations, Additional Updates. And if I can steal the screen from Sarah for a moment, I will show it to you there. And Brad or Travis can speak to that when we get to that item.
Did you just hijack the screen?
I did, Sarah.
Wow.
I asked permission as I was taking it away from you.
Greg is back, folks.
Welcome back with a vengeance. Are there any other agenda additions or changes, staff or trustees? All right, hearing none, would someone like to make a motion to amend the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda.
I think George had it.
Yep.
Dan, do you want to second that one?
I'll second that motion.
Great. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right, so that moves us on from the agenda. And so now we're on to the portion of the meeting of public to be heard. And this is the portion of the meeting in which if there is somebody in the public who wishes to speak to the board about an agenda or about something that is not on tonight's agenda, now is the time to do so. I will go ahead and I'll pause for approximately 30 or so seconds for those who are dialing in and have that slight delay to make sure you're caught up. For those of you using Teams, please either raise your hand or use the chat bar to let us know that you'd like to speak. So I will pause now and go ahead and start. Patty, I think I see you raising your hand. You have the floor. Although you're muted.
Now, okay.
There you go.
Yeah, this is probably no one's fault. I'm not pointing any fingers. I just want to, I wrote it down so I can be quick because you guys are busy, and so I'm just going to read it. Maybe inadvertently, my statements were left out of the July 28th minutes. And this doesn't even have anything to do with you. It's really the select board, but I don't know who the secretary is for both boards. I don't know if there's one secretary who takes the minutes for both boards. I have no clue. So I'll just rattle this off.
Before you do, Patty, if I can actually
Yes.
jump in, since that was a select board meeting, it's we have no purview over it. We can't change the minutes. We can't do anything to reflect the changes.
I see.
Patty, this is Evan. Patty, this is Evan. Can you just send me an email? I'll take care of it.
Oh,
You have my email address. I've gotten stuff from you before. Send me an email.
yeah, I could do that. Or I'll wait till the select board meeting. I just figured that I would say something to you guys too, because how we're having this whole thing between, well, the only thing I wanted to say was I don't have the exact statement that Andy Watts said in the last meeting about our shared services and what we pay. You know what I mean? But he rattled that off on, there's certain areas of our government that the town outside the village does pay its fair share. And
So Patty,
I can't quote that. So I just wanted to,
is this for the joint meeting,
my
Patty?
minutes recorded. So that's all.
Is it for the joint meeting?
Yeah, so I'll wait.
Okay. So yes, if you can wait until that
Thank you
portion.
for your time. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right, is there anybody else from the public who wish to speak to something that is not on the agenda tonight? I believe that has been 30 seconds. I've seen nobody's hands are up. There's nobody in the chat wishing to speak. So we can move on from public to be heard. And that will bring us into agenda for business item 5A, an interview and potential appointment to the Bike Walk Advisory Committee. And with us tonight, we have Ramón Matanzo, who has applied for the the seat on the committee. Excited to have Ramon with us tonight. So the way that this will go, we'll ask a few questions, get to know you a little bit better, and then we, I believe, have on our agenda tonight where we can make a decision tonight to appoint you. So we may do that later on in the meeting tonight. You are free to stick around to hear that result. You're free to leave after we're done with the interview. It's totally up to you. And the other thing that we also offer is if you have any concerns with your employment or the fact that this is also a public open session and you're concerned about any potential raising anything you don't want to be made public, we can also have this conversation in executive session. So that way it could just be a conversation with the board and us, or with you and the board. Is that something you'd like to do, or are you okay in public session?
I'm okay.
Okay. Then Ramon, with that said, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, why you're interested in the bike walk committee?
So my name is Ramón Matanzo. I have been a Vermont resident since 2016. I'm moving to work with USCIS, that's United States Citizenship and Immigrant Services, where I currently am a supervisor. And so that's my job. That's what I usually, that's what I'm doing here in Vermont. And I fell in love with the state. I have never been in the state before. And I'm surprised. I didn't know I was gonna fall in love with such a great community. And of course, we all have seen the postcards. I'm Puerto Rican. In the States, 17 years. Have jumped from Florida, Texas, Colorado. My siblings are in Colorado, so I'm not a stranger to cold weather. And well, going back to the community aspect of all of it, I think as a cyclist and of course as a person that likes to walk and enjoy the outdoors in all seasons, initially what gave me the impulse is to start making recommendations. To say, okay, I can see that. Okay, as a cyclist, my life is in danger, 80% of the time. So let me see how can I, maybe like say something, and to whom say something, right? So one of my friends in the neighborhood, but also from the gym I attend to, Elia Messi, he is part of the Bike and Walk board, and he, in one of our bike rides, suggested I apply for this position, and it really interests me, and that's the main reason. I needed that push, and I didn't even know the board existed, right? So now I really want to, even if I don't get the position, now I know where to, route my suggestions. Elia will be here a lot of things about me. And just to let you know, well, I have thought about, for example, I'm not sure how you guys work with the other aspects of the community, but definitely how to open a door, things like that. Or maybe if we open the door with the right hand, we'll be looking if there's a gum in a cyclist or not. So stuff, that I think and that they have been implemented in other towns across the world. And also something that I really enjoy as a cyclist is seeing the protective cones that some parts of or different towns have, right? Like in South Burlington, I believe there's sections with them. So I just want to channel my suggestions, mainly as a cyclist, and I'm always hyper aware of the reality and the possibility of getting hit by a car or maybe by a dog, or I don't know. But yeah, that's probably my main objective here, just to channel my suggestions and have a space to.
Thank you, Ramon. One last question for me, and then I'll open up to the rest of the board. As you've cycled around the community, are there things that you see that you think we have done well, or things that you think this have not done so well?
So, of course, being able to see the lights in the crosswalks when I believe that those lights are very important when you are driving, and I'm not sure if it was the intent. I even thought that, hey, it gives me as a cyclist the heads up, there's someone there. And sometimes when I stop because the light is on, the person who's waiting for the light, they look at me like, what are you doing? Well, you know, they don't expect the cyclist to stop. I have gotten that at least twice. And so that's really great. That's really great. And I think that it should be encouraged among cyclists too. You know, because we think that I know the cyclist mentality is kind of, okay, I own the road and they have to be careful about me. I get that too. So that's something that I really appreciate. Something that I believe there's always room to improve is the spacing. The spacing to ride a bike is not the same everywhere. It's what it riding in Vermont. It's my connection as a foreigner, as an out-of-stater with this beautiful place. And yes, it's in my scenario, in my personal, in my experience, it's not my commuting way. It's my method of transportation. It is not. But I believe that maybe if there were safer spaces or bigger spaces, maybe more people would do it. Definitely between Essex and the Ethan Allen path, between Essex and, let's say, St. Mark's, like from Pearl Street. Oh my goodness. And yeah, I'm a daredevil. I do it. I don't mind. And watch out for me. But it's there's no sidewalk. The only way to go through that part is behind Ethan Allen right now, where the apartments. And that's definitely something that it's really nice to go all the way straight to Burlington. And I see that there's a big space of grass in both sides. I know, and I'm thinking, okay, that's a lot of money, and it doesn't cost me anything to go through the barracks, but it's just continuing going straight, you know. So that's something that I would like to see sometime, you know. And of course, I don't know if this has, but as I mentioned, I'm a Vermont resident, and I decided to stay in the state, and I believe that to enjoy everything that the state provides, and the state also embraces that, right? We see it in, as I said before, in all the postcards, in all the magazines. People come here to bike, and I just feel that it's exciting to be part of the change and to be part of the improvement. Hopefully that was.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. And other board members, questions for Ramón? George, go right ahead.
Ramón, it's George Tyler, and I appreciate all the words you've said. I'm on the Board of Trustees. I don't have a question right now, but I really appreciate your observant. You put your finger right on one of the big issues for us, which is the connection between Essex Junction and Burlington. And as you saw, there are pieces of it that are done really well, and there are pieces of it that are pretty dangerous. And it is a big project by the Regional Planning Commission to try to, over the years, to have a complete network, a complete safe biking path all the way from Essex Junction through that bit of Essex and into Colchester, Winooski. And you will, if we choose you, you'll certainly have an opportunity to contribute to that and advocate for that. So I appreciate that. I just wanted to bring that up. It shows me that you're really paying attention.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other trustees with other questions for Ramón? I see Amber saying no.
I'll ask one more if I can. Ramon, I'm just curious, what neighborhood, where do you live in the village? What neighborhood are you in?
I live in Bridger Road.
Okay.
I live in the same neighborhood, frankly. My home looks almost exactly the same as yours, so I was going to take that guess. But yeah. So seeing as we don't have any other questions, I see that you did speak with Elijah. My assumption is that you've had a conversation about that the practice for the bike walk committee has been that they meet once a month for a few hours in the evening. Is that a commitment that you can take on? Okay. So seeing as we don't have any other questions, is there anything else you'd like to say to us before we let you go? Great. Well, Ramon, we thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for your candidacy. And regardless as to the action tonight, we will let you know within a day or so.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you. Have a good night.
Thank you as well, Ramon. Okay. So we do have on this agenda, this does say interview and potential appointment. If the board would like to, does the board want to go ahead and make the decision now, or would the board like to wait? I know I personally am fine making the decision tonight.
Yes, I would like, I'm sorry, I'll raise my hand, Andrew. Sorry, I'm still not getting it. I'm going to raise my hand.
When it's just us, it's fine.
All right. I'm gonna because I was so impressed with his for being here so relatively small amount of time, with his understanding of everything that's going on. I'd like to recommend we appoint Ramón Matanzo to the Essex Junction Bike Walk Committee.
Second.
George has the motion and Amber made the second. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of appointing Ramon to the Bike Walk Advisory Committee, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Okay.
Anybody opposed? And that passed unanimously. I'm not sure if Ramon is with us or not, but Ramon, you're a part of the committee. Thank you for your candidacy and good luck.
So I might have, I know we have a couple of other vacancies on Bike Walk now as well, right? Are those being advertised? Do we know? Evan?
It's a great question for staff.
I believe they just came in, Amber. So if they're not advertised, they will be in the very near future.
Okay, thanks.
So to your point, Amber, yes, and to anybody in the public who happens to be paying attention right now, there are 2 slots on the Bike Walk Advisory Committee. It's a great committee. It provided us with recommendations on various aspects to make our community more bike-friendly and more walkable. They have done the significant lifting around getting us to be a bike-friendly community. I believe we are a bronze medalist from the Bike Walk awarding body. So we've done well, and there's still certainly some room for improvement. If you're interested, please submit a letter to Evan Teach, and we'd love to have you on the committee. That item done, that will bring us to 5B, about considering the adoption of the revised Essex Junction General Rules and Personnel Regulations.
Thank you. This is going to be handled by Travis, and I believe Brad Luck is also going to be involved in this one. So, Travis?
Yep. So I'll take the first crack. I'm going to let Brad focus more specifically on the EJRP changes, because a lot of them are part of sort of a larger restructuring that he can speak to better than I can. The first change we put in here was just to lay down some parameters for what happens when an employee is either promoted to a position in a higher pay grade, or when their position is reclassified to a higher pay grade. The practice, from what I've found, looking back at historical data, has been a bit all over the place. It's sort of varied employee by employee. It's varied depending on where the employee was in their current pay grade. I personally think we very much need to be consistent in our pay practices for a variety of reasons. The 5.5% was chosen. It represents half of the 11% difference between the minimums of each pay range. That's in line with what the town's doing. The town pay ranges are currently 7% apart, and the increase is 3.5% for a grade change. It's also very much in line with what I've seen for some of our other Chittenden County municipalities. And it's more or less in line with the various methods I've seen in the past as well. But I just really wanted to define it. It's not something that's currently defined in the association contract either. But I think this is a good first step towards getting something in place with the ultimate goal being that we negotiate this same policy into the contract this November, December when we start negotiating again. So that's that. The changes to the overtime section was something I discussed with Brad, and I can let him speak to that a little bit as well. We're definitely still, in compliance with the FLSA. Our policies go very much above and beyond what's required by law in terms of overtime. Brad's staff work a lot of off hours, holidays, just due to the nature of their work, due to the events they cover. So this really is very much in line with what they've been doing. Typically, they'll switch shifts or they'll rearrange shifts. Obviously, if they, work a holiday and still have over 40 hours in a week, they're going to receive overtime for that. So that's what those changes were. The changes to the job structure section, particularly the ones listed in 3A there. As you guys probably know, we've used Gallagher Flynn historically for compensation analysis. The only two positions this year that were recommended to be moved were both the grounds and facilities technician and the assistant zoning administrator / admin assistant to the ComDev director position. So both of those were recommended to be bumped up one pay grade. We did a bit of an internal analysis as well. We reviewed the reference points Gallagher Flynn used. We also used the data points in the VLCT compensation study. And I'm very much in agreement that both of those positions are not graded appropriately and do need to be moved. So that's that recommendation. I'll speak briefly to the next two. The grounds and facilities foreman was a new job description that Brad and his EJRP staff put together. It was reviewed in the study. The pay grade we've slotted it in at is what the study recommended. Again, it is a new position, but it's not one we anticipate filling. It's meant to add promotional opportunities and future growth opportunities down the road. It is not an effort to budget a new position right now. And then the assistant site coordinator, which is where I'm going to kick this over to Brad, is part of this overall restructure. So it's a position that's existed, but it's always been part-time. So it was not previously in the personnel regulations. So the grade we've slotted it in at is in line with what the hourly rate has been for that position. But it is moving to full-time as part of a restructuring. I don't know if Brad is here and wants to talk further to some of the changes he's doing.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. We have a variety of changes, and I think the trustees saw, hopefully there's one addition that wasn't in the packet that you should have got received tonight about two other changes. Basically changing the title of the licensed child care assistant director to school age child care assistant director / site coordinator, and adding in the school age child care assistant director at grade 8. Basically, we have a lot of moving parts at the moment, so we just needed to get a few things clarified in the personnel regs so that we can proceed with some hiring for this fall.
Thank you. Is that it, Travis, Brad? Ready for questions from board members?
Yep.
Great. I have a couple. Travis, I'm curious on the intersection between the capabilities to change the personnel regs without renegotiating in the association contract. Is it because this isn't within that contract that we can make this change?
Yeah, are you speaking specifically about the 5.5% pay change?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm certainly leaning on that argument. It's not something that's currently defined in their contract. I would say there's not a past practice currently defined in their contract. It's been very much all over the place. I'm planning to have this conversation with the association president. One of the positions we're moving, the assistant zoning admin, is an association position. And we've been talking about this for quite a while. The movement of that position initially came up during contract negotiations, but sort of dropped off as we transitioned to a one-year agreement. But I've talked to Chelsea Mandigo, the president. I've talked to Corey, the VP, as well. Specifically, I've dug into some of the past practice about pay changes due to grade changes I've done with Chelsea. So she knows I'm looking to better define this. So I don't think it's going to be a huge issue with the association. They very well may try to negotiate something different down the road, at which point I would want to change the regs to mirror that. But I'm thinking this is a good first step for us to get something in place and try to use that to work with the association for what we're looking to do down the road.
Okay. And then my other question is for Brad. Brad, can you talk a little bit about the reorg that's going on? And one question I possibly related, within the memo under 3C, it talks about several resignations. Just if you want to talk a little bit about what's going on.
Sure. Trying to see the piece about the, yeah. So we had Lindsay Going-Swaim left us and moved to New York back in December. And when she did that, she was our after-school enrichment coordinator. We worked with Essex Parks and Rec and with Betsy Hoffmeister, who was performing the same duties in the town, and she's now performing those for both the village and the town. So that was one change that happened to us. Of course, Betsy took over the after-school enrichment portion of Lindsay's job, but wasn't able to fulfill all of Lindsay's job because she still had to do those services for the town. So we had some outstanding work that needed to be filled within somebody's job description. And then Alyssa Callan was slated to leave us in early October. She's moving to Tennessee. Both of them Lindsay due to her husband finding a new job, and Alyssa due to her boyfriend relocating and having a new job. And so we recently conducted a search for a replacement for Alyssa, and actually just last Thursday reached to the conclusion that we're not able to find a suitable replacement at the moment. And so it's required us to do a little bit of shuffling. Alyssa, fortunately, in these COVID-19 times, there's now this concept of remote work. And so Alyssa will continue to manage 85% of her duties remotely. But we've been able to restructure things and move some staff around to kind of make it all work. This is kind of a temporary fix. What we found is that the skills required for Alyssa's position aren't really out there in the marketplace. There's kind of a gap between licensed childcare site coordinators, boots on the ground folks, and those who perform administrative services. And so our plan is over the next 10 or 12 months to get some of our staff trained in some of the things Alyssa does and basically grow those skills in-house. So they're not resignations, Andrew, due to unhappy employees. I know that's where you were going. Yeah. But no, we just had 2 people move on, and we're filling those voids in different ways than they were filled before.
No, in all honesty, my question wasn't around dissatisfaction with EJRP or dissatisfaction with the community. More so, those who are in childcare, I get personally concerned about those who are on the front lines, especially at this point in time in COVID. And so I just was curious if there's any relation between being on the front line, potential exposure to this pandemic, and more along that line.
Yeah, no, and sorry, there was one other resignation, Denise Malm, who for the last 5 years has been the coordinator at Fleming. She is pursuing her master's degree in English as English language learners, and so she stepped down to pursue that full time.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Unfortunate for us, good for everybody.
Yeah, Denise was really fantastic.
Yeah.
Andrew, this is Evan. I'd chime in. Yeah, there's a lot of stress in COVID and in childcare. But I think one of the things that Brad, Travis, and the rest of the group has really stressed is that safety factor. We fog our buildings a lot. We clean surfaces a lot. I commend Brad making sure that all of our facilities that we have children and adults in, we take very seriously. And Brad, you can jump in as to all the precautions taken.
I know you have another meeting in 14 minutes, so I don't know how much you want us to expound on what we've been doing, but it certainly is a lot. And we also have, we've now reached over the 700 mark in terms of number of kids who are seeking school day care as schools go remote or hybrid for the start of the school year.
Wow. That will not be a light lift.
Yeah.
Wish you and your staff well.
Thank you.
Trustees, any other questions?
No question. You got a ticking noise in your background there, Andrew. It's quite loud. I don't know. Clock or what?
No, it's my ceiling fan, a little unbalanced. George, you got a question? Go ahead.
I don't have a question for the rec specifically. I think I want to go back to the original discussion of the personnel regs, and I'm just making a general comment. I don't see, unless I'm a little obtuse, I'm not seeing anything in here that the Employees Association wouldn't like. I would look at all of this as being very positive. So unless I'm missing something, Travis, do you want to jump in? Am I missing something? This seems like a win for everybody.
Yeah, the only concern I could see is if they didn't think the 5.5% was a high enough bump for a pay grade change. But like I mentioned, it's pretty in line with what the PES has brought along. So I don't anticipate it being an issue.
Okay.
I think it's the right number. I think it's an equitable way to face our pay structure. And I'll absolutely have this conversation with Chelsea as well on behalf of the association. But as far as immediate impact, yeah, it's going to result in an association member bumping up a pay grade, a long-term association member getting a 5.5% pay increase.
Right.
So I certainly think the association will be happy with this.
Okay, thanks.
So trustees, there's no other comments or questions. The recommendation's on the screen. If someone wants to go ahead and make the motion.
I will make a motion that the trustees adopt the proposed revisions to the Village of Essex Junction General Rules and Personnel Regulations.
Second.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Amber. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, so that passed unanimously. Thank you, Travis. Thank you, Brad.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And last but not least, request to award a sole source purchase of an air compressor with Fire Chief Gaboriault.
Good evening.
Hey, Chris.
Good evening. Is there any, we have the memo. I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to elaborate on, or if you want to introduce this for those who didn't have the privilege of reading it in advance.
Sure, I could give you a brief history on it. Basically, we put it in the budget to replace our air compressor. This is the compressor we use to fill our self-contained breathing apparatus bottles. The current compressor we have is 35 years old. Certainly would not be serviceable if in fact this broke down, and again would lead us to taking immediate action to find something. So we put this in the budget to replace it with the unit that I had selected here. One of the reasons, again, we're staying with a Bauer compressor. This was on our previous compressor that lasted us 35 years. If you were to go throughout the fire industry, I would say 80% of your fire stations probably have some type of a Bauer compressor as part of their filling station. So we're going with that. One of the key things here, again, kind of costly, but we have included a data logger. So what that does basically is the new bottles that we received off our grant last year all have RFID tags to them, so that now people will be required to be, number one, trained to be able to use the system. They'll be required to log in, and then the bottles will all be tracked so that we'll have a database as to who filled bottles, when they were filled, and if we exceed our hydrostatic testing, which has to be done every 5 years, the system actually would not allow that bottle to be filled if it was in that condition. So just some extra safety there. The other big thing is the fact that this unit is all enclosed, which allows us to put it in the back of the bay floor. One of the other things we're looking at doing is vacating the back room that our compressor is currently in, as we have another AFG grant in this year for 2 extractors to clean our gear. So right now we're waiting to hear on those, but we're in anticipation that we're going to be successful and that we will be moving some extractors into the room where our current compressor is located. So we need to move this unit out in the back of the bay floor.
Thank you. I had 2 questions. One, I remember this coming up during our budget day. I don't recall the exact amount that we had set aside for it. I assume it was 80 to 85,000 or so, and this is within the budget.
Correct.
Great.
It was 80,000 in the budget.
Okay, and so then I assume we have that extra, that 5,000 we can have, or we have somewhere.
Yeah, Chris and I work on places in his budget to fill that.
Yeah, if we need to fill that extra from my budget, we'll make that happen.
Okay. And then my only other question was around the login process or login procedure with the data logger. That sounds cool. Are there any concerns though about any potential delay in filling up the tanks because of this in any emergency situation?
No, basically what you want is you want to make sure that who's ever dealing with that station is qualified to use it. Today, if you were to hand a bottle to me and say, Chris, how many times has this been filled and who filled it, we would have no record of that whatsoever. So the bottom line is we have bottles for all of our air packs and then a spare for every one of the air packs that we carry on the apparatus. So we have plenty of bottles available. So it would be more for dealing with those or filling those once we return from a call.
Great, thank you. And George, I see your hand is up.
Thanks, Andrew. Chris, I'm first. I just want to say I'm glad you're doing this. I was concerned, I think, as we all were, when we learned that the old your current compressor is really on its last legs. This seems like a critical piece of apparatus, so I'm glad you're doing this. I have just a really sidetrack technical question. I'm just curious. Is this filling the tanks with atmospheric air, or do you get oxygen tanks, nitrogen, and have some kind of a mix of air? How does that work?
So it does take the air from the outside. It's filtered. Okay. So it goes through a number of filters before it actually goes into the bottles.
Okay.
One of the other options we have here is a carbon monoxide detection. So if for whatever reason the ambient air that it was pulling from outside had any carbon monoxide in there, the unit would not fill the bottles as well.
Shut it down. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions from trustees tonight? All right. If somebody would like to go ahead and make the motion.
Motion that the trustees waive the bid process and authorize the purchase from Reynolds and Sons for the Unicus 4i breathing air compressor system.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, George. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Great. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time.
Yes. And that brings us onto the consent agenda, which before somebody so quickly goes to approve of the minutes, I actually had a change. In the August 11th minutes, under 4A with comments from the public. Brian Schnell is the name that's used. The individual's name was Brian Shung, and that's spelled Hsiang. And then I had two other changes on the second page at line 58 and 96. Miss Duaney White is referenced, but that's Anne, A-N-N-E, White, and the White is spelled W-H-Y-T-E. So if those three changes could be made. Those were all the changes that I had for the consent agenda.
Okay. And I will make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as amended.
I'll go ahead and second that to move this along. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Great. And that brings us into the reading file with board member comments. I know that, George, there was something related you had emailed me about. I don't have all the details in front of me. Do you mind addressing that?
No, I don't. That's why I raised my hand. And I think this is something we all know about. I don't think there's any surprise. So I wanted to just, first of all, say I had been in touch with Susan regarding the timing and of putting the merger charter on the ballot in November. And we have the same amount of time as we would for any other village motion that we put on a ballot. We were not tied to the time. In fact, I think we have until September 21st or 23rd. I'm not sure, but I know it's fairly late in September. We have until we put a merger charter. We put the charter question on a ballot. But the thing I wanted to address is that once that goes out. Right. I'm not, was that? So I wanted to say once that goes out, people can start voting, and so people could begin to vote on that charter proposal as soon as early in October. So. And this is a highly unusual question we're posing to the village. And I think it's really important that we make an all-out, full-scale effort to explain to our constituents in the village what this is about, to inform them what is in the charter. And I think we need to probably have a multimedia. We probably need print, video, website, all of that. So I'm going to first of all request that we put that on the ballot for our very next meeting. I mean, on the agenda for our very next meeting, Andrew. And I would like to also suggest that we all be thinking of creative ways of how we want to approach this, because I think this is a huge community decision on how they want to vote, and I think we have to be right up front about it. We have to. I mean, we can certainly advocate for one position or another, but I think most important is just getting all the facts and information out and letting the community make decisions on their own. So I just wanted to mention that, Andrew, so that we can. I'd really request this be put on the ballot. I mean, on the agenda for our next meeting, and also to have all the trustees. And if I think some one-on-one conversation, to bounce some ideas off each other wouldn't be a bad idea, but I'd really urge us to come ready to take some fairly quick action, because we're going to have a very narrow window to whatever we're going to do to get it out the door by the time people start getting ballots in their hands. Thanks.
Absolutely, you're 100% correct that we need to make sure people understand what they're voting on, and that there's no misunderstandings as to also what this does not mean.
Right.
We don't want to give any false hopes, false promises, and be as transparent about this as possible. So is the question still on the table as to what date we have until to finalize the actual charter? Because last night, from our previous meeting, I thought we had been told that September 3rd was a date in which we had to have the final charter done.
You know what, Andrew, I'm sorry. My apologies. I have that date written down, but I don't have it handy. It's in another room on a piece of paper somewhere, so I can email it to you, so we can get that under control. Sure.
I think you're right, Andrew. I think from what Dan Richardson said, I believe we have until September 3rd.
Okay, because that's also going to impact Evan.
I'm not sure of that date. The village is actually different. There was a deadline for the state ballot. The village cannot go on the state ballot because of its districts. Let me look up, there's an email, let me look it up. Give me a minute.
If you can, I don't think
I'll
we need it for
try.
this. I don't think we need it for this moment in time.
Okay.
If we can get the response though before we adjourn tonight, because if we need to make sure that we have a meeting for either later this week or early next week, I think we need to get that solidified tonight.
Okay.
So while we wait on that, and that can happen again later on. Any trustees, any other comments before we take the break for the joint meeting? All right, see nothing. Brings us to the end of the trustees meeting agenda, and so we can take a brief pause while we welcome the select board on. While we're doing that, if you can give me a moment.
How's everybody doing?
Good. How are you doing, Ben?
So Andrew,
Not too bad.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Evan, I think Andrew needed a minute. Hey, Raj.
George.
Yeah.
I'm sending you a email from Susan from August 21st.
Okay. Got it.
I wish she wasn't using clerk speak.
Yeah, I know.
It's okay though. So while that gets resolved, maybe at the end of the meeting when we get to board member comments, we can bring this back up at that point.
Yeah, I just sent it to you and to George because it looks to me. So let me know when you want me to read this. I can read it out loud.
Yes, it's definitely.
So hello, select board. Trustees, we are back in session.
How are you?
Trustees, good to see you. It looks like all 5 of us are here, but I'm going to call a roll real quick anyway. Pat Murray, Andy Watts.
Yep, I'm here.
Don Hill-Fleury.
Here.
And Vince Franco. There you are.
Here.
I will call the select board meeting to order.
And that will bring us into agenda additions or changes for tonight. You have any from staff?
We do have some from staff. Let me just pull it up. There's some additional handouts to go with item 5B. We have an email from Brad Luck about impacts of having the merger delayed, also from the Essex Fire Department, so the same topic. To go with item 5C, we have the select board's edits to the Essex Junction Trustees version, August 20th version of the charter, and questions on the charter version 2.0.
Thank you. And do we have any agenda additions tonight from elected officials?
Select board, do you have any items you wish to pull off the consent agenda? Looks like we're good.
All right. So trustees, would someone like to make a motion to amend the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Dan. I think Raj, you said second.
I did.
Great. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right.
Select board, can I get a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Thank you, Pat.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Vince. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, thank you.
That brings us into public to be heard. So this is a portion of the meeting where if there is somebody from the public who wishes to inform the boards about something that is not on the agenda, now is the time to do so. As the way this goes, we will pause for approximately 30 seconds for those who are not using Microsoft Teams to have that delay catch up. For those who are using Teams, you can do what is being demonstrated by waving and letting us know that you'd like to speak. You can also use the hand feature or type into the chat window to let us know you'd like to speak. And then we will go ahead and let you know when it is your turn. And again, this is not to have a back and forth conversation. This is more so let us know if there's something you'd like for us to know, and then we will go on to the next individual. So Patty, I saw you waving. Why don't you kick us off?
Okay. Am I unmuted?
You're good.
Oh, great. I just want to make a statement, and there's no judgment involved, but my quotes were not documented in the minutes on July 28th. It's no biggie, but I would like to reiterate in a nutshell that I gave an example that the reason we don't want the tax shift is that if I lived in South Burlington and was going to pay for Burlington because they wanted money because they have that big hole in the ground, that, yeah, I feel bad for them, but I live in South Burlington. So if you think I'm selfish, too bad. So that needs to go in the minutes. And it just wasn't on July 28th, so you can put it today. That's fine. And the other thing I wanted to say is I want to commend both Andrew and Elaine. I'm really excited and proud of Andrew, how he really is keeping his eye on the finances. That when he said it wasn't true that the capital being spent completely outside the village, to Roger's comment on an August 20th meeting, that 3/4 of the money goes to the shared services, which are 77% of the town budget supports shared services, not town outside the village only. So maybe because I didn't put my last name when I sign up on the Microsoft Teams, I just put Patty. Maybe that's why the secretary inadvertently didn't put my quotes in my minutes in the writing like everyone else. And I would like that to be done today. Thank you.
So Patrick, I see that your hand is up. And I think you're muted.
Okay, apologies. Sorry about that, Andrew. Patty, I do think it does bear in mind that minutes in and of themselves, while certainly can be included, are meant to capture the spirit of conversations. They are not in any way, shape, or form meant to be direct quotes from individuals, even those members of the public who stand up to speak. So if it wasn't exactly what you like, we have recommended certainly that if you have issues with the minutes to email them into us, but at no way in any point in the past should there be explicit word by word communication of what happens in meetings in the minutes. That's just not what they're for.
Okay, and is there anyone else from the public who wish to address the boards about something that is not on the agenda? Irene, go right ahead.
Thank you. On the topic of minutes, I noticed that in those July 28th joint minutes that at least the select board has already approved, on line 167, it says Ms. Renner gave her impression that, and I don't think it's fair to assume that just because someone states something, it's just their impression, because there are other people quoted within those same minutes who are reporting information that is not true, and it's stated that they stated that information. So I would just ask that everybody involved with minutes, whether they're taking the minutes or correcting the minutes or updating the minutes, be very careful, because it's hard to know sometimes what the real truth is. And so if you would report everything as everyone states it, I think that's the most fair way to do it. Thank you.
And is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak? Betsy Dunn, go right ahead.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. I would like to ask that I've been doing more hiking on the trails in Essex, and I think that there is a need for some benches or something for people when they're walking, because I came across an older man who was walking and he was huffing and puffing and there was no place for him to sit. I think that this could be something could be added in on the budgets when you start doing your budget. Thank you.
Thank you. And anybody else from the public who wish to address the board on something that is not on the agenda? Irene, I see your hand is up. Is that a holdover from before?
It's a holdover, thanks. I'll put it down.
Kathy?
Hi, I just wanted to thank Patty, Irene, and Patrick for your suggestions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. So again, just going to pause that 30 seconds.
Oh, I want to say one more thing. One more thing.
Go ahead, Patty. Is this
I just want to say
different
one
issue?
thing. It's a good thing. I want to say one thing. I really am very proud of Elaine, and I really am. I'm excited to watch the select board meetings now, and I appreciate your support, Elaine. And I wish all our representatives were like you that represent us in the legislature. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Patty.
Okay, if the boards are willing, I think maybe we can move off from public comments. Would bring us into business item 5A, discussion regarding state and local education tax with special guest Brian Donahue from the Essex Westford School District. I assume we have, hello Brian.
Hello, I didn't queue up my theme music, so that was a little less eventful joining the meeting, but thank you.
If you'd like, we could try to get some final countdown going, maybe.
It's always a good choice. If everyone is open to it, I will launch in. I'll give my best. See if I can share my screen. Is everyone able to see that?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yes.
So, this is great that we have an interest to learn more about this. This is really important to our community and our state, so I'm happy to join you. I'm sure I will just do an adequate job. There's Roger Derby, who is a former CCSU CFO, used to have a saying that this is not uncomplicated. And the idea that we can kind of get together for a few minutes and really get to the depth of educational financing and tax rate calculation is maybe a little optimistic, but happy to join you anytime. And Patrick is an expert, so you can just really rely on his advice and guidance.
They already have, Brian. Brought you in.
I thought the best way to kind of walk through this is to be somewhere at like that 9,500 foot level. So to use some really precise detail, but to also try to stay a little bit out of the weeds, so that maybe the general sense of how things work can get across, and then we can always dive into deeper in the questions. So, when we talk about tax rates and homestead tax rates, a lot of it starts off with the net educational spending. And that's a fancy term for saying sort of what our budget is after we take out all the local revenues. So you can see from this chart here, we had an FY21 proposed budget of just over $82 million. And in comparison, year over year, that was under 1% increase. We also had a statewide mandated healthcare settlement with our employees. That was something that was decided to be done across the entire state rather than locally, and it ended up having an impact of about $370,000 in additional cost than we had anticipated. So that brought us to a total expense budget year over year of increasing about 1.35%. So pretty modest in comparison to what was originally projected for school budgets to be increasing in excess of 5%. And then local revenues are a lot of our federal and state grants. There are reimbursements for special education. There are carryover fund balance. There are any generated revenues that we have from gate receipts and other revenues. When we subtract that all out, it says this is the amount of money that we're going to need from the state ed fund. And in our case, it was just under $63 million, or about 2.51% more. That becomes the big number that all goes together and aggregates into what the demand is on our state ed fund. Once we take a look at that ed spending, we are then required to start to do a few more calculations. And again, some of these calculations have a 2-year basis to them. Some are current, but the first one is to take a look at our equalized pupils. So this isn't our enrollment, and it isn't what we expect to have enrolled next year. It actually is a 2-year average of our daily membership, and therefore it can be portions of people. It's not necessarily everybody doesn't count. It's how many classes, how many credits do they take, how many months were they with us, or how many days out of a certain period of time. Our number went down slightly, and that's a factor of a whole host of things. But generally speaking, the amount that it went down, we would be considered to be flat in the state. Many districts see much more serious declines in student enrollment than we experience here. We take our net ed spending and we divide it by that equalized pupil, and that gets our ed spending by equalized pupil. And this number shows up on our article for Australian ballot, as does the gross expense number. And that number is going up 3.36%. So we're starting to get a theme that there's a different rate of increase or decrease for every number. But follow me for a little bit. We then take a state calculated yield, and this is the yield that property taxes would need to be to basically be able to create the funding necessary within the ed fund. And we divide our ed spending per equalized pupil by that yield. That's set by, originally it's calculated and projected by the tax commissioner, and then eventually it is set at the time where the final budget is approved by the legislature. Therefore, you can imagine that school directors are always using projections and estimates well through the process of needing to get a budget passed by its voters, and then information comes to us well after the fact. Especially in this case where we're having budgets more often be passed at the end of June, and budgets are being voted on in March and in April in our case. So that gets us a homestead tax rate. And you can see that when we go through this calculation, based upon our expenditures and our revenues, our school district was calculating a tax rate that would be a year over year of just over 1%. But that's not the end of the story. We have to take that, and because we've merged, we have an incentive, and that incentive started at 10 cents and declines by 2 cents each year since the merger. And so in effect, it becomes a 2-cent tax increase to the homestead tax rate. It still is wonderful, but by its nature of a declining one, it's constantly adding that pressure into the tax rate. So you can see that the incentive, the difference in the incentive goes from the without incentive of just over 1% to now 2.5, 2.56. So before I go any further, because as we know that the next portion is one of the most significant drivers, and that's the common level of appraisal. And because there's no way that every community in the state could possibly do a reappraisal each and every year to have homes at their fair market value, the states devised a statistical way of calculating that. And they admit that it's not perfect, but it gets us so that we're close to fair market value. And this only affects school taxes. It doesn't affect municipal taxes at all. In the end, it's sort of the good news within the bad news, because often a declining CLA, it does give the impression that it's increasing the tax rate. But what it's doing is meeting the investment the homeowners have made and the increase to that investment, so that people are being in fact taxed at their fair market value. Now, again, we'll go in and talk about how this is only for a certain portion of Vermonters and a certain portion of our residents. The CLA has over time been dropping. When there's a CLA at 100%, it means the most recent appraisal is matching the statistical analysis that's creating a fair market value. And over time, there starts to be a gap in which presently they're saying that the grand list for Essex Town and Essex Junction is approximately 91.86% of what fair market value would be. So therefore, it then impacts the tax rate so that everyone is taxed at their fair market value. Year over year, that declined by 2.4%. And you can see that Westford declined much steeper. Now, when we say that, it means that property values on the grand list went up about 2.4%, or in Westford went up much higher at almost 5%. And what happens when we take that homestead tax rate after incentive and we multiply it by those common level of appraisals, we start to get our final numbers. So you can see that Essex Town, Essex Junction for FY21 is roughly 1.617 for a tax rate, or about an 8-cent increase, or we can look at it as a 5.11% increase. Now, these are only applicable to about 30% of homeowners, because the rest of Vermont, of approximately 68 to 70%, pay based upon some income sensitivity. I want to just take a second to go a little bit deeper into this idea of what the CLA does and versus what the school budget is doing. I know this is a busy slide, so pardon me, but it tries to put all the information together in one spot. Let's just follow in the middle of this graph. We're going to follow the lines of Essex Town here. And what it does is it tracks over time what the common level of appraisal was, starting in 14-15 and going to 2021, and the projections for the school year we're in right now. And you can see that over time, we went from approximately 100% down to now 91.86%. Now, if we look at the tax rate without the CLA, which is the most relevant or the clearest direction to the spending patterns, habits, and needs of the school district, opposed to the increasing property values within the town or community, which one could suggest might be affected by the quality of education that they have in their community. We can see that over time, from 2014-15 to 2020, from 20 to 21, we can see that the tax rate for Essex Town actually went down 2.14%, or it went from $1.52 down to $1.48. Now, if you put the CLA in and the increasing property values that we've experienced, and therefore the increase in the investment we made in our homes, you can see that we went from $1.50 to $1.61, 62, or about a 7.2% increase over that period of time, if you annualize that out. The same is described for Essex Junction and for Westford, the other communities, so that there's all three communities within the EWSD district. And I looked up, when we were doing this for the school district, I looked up some information that showed that property home values increased between almost 9% to just over 11% since 2014-15. And if you looked at and compare that, the tax rates have increased approximately 5% to almost 8%. Getting near the end and can open it up to questions. I just want to talk a little about income sensitivity. So again, about 68% of Vermonters pay on an income sensitized property tax. So if somebody is at an income level, they are not paying based upon their property value, but paying based upon their household income. Now, probably classic to the idea of how our tax rates that people actually pay are then calculated. The Department of Taxes estimates that there's about 22 steps necessary for a taxpayer to determine the impact of their district's school budget on their individual homestead property tax. You need to understand how much property they have, how much is classified as taxable, how much is then common use, how much is where their income is, how they file, and so forth. So it does become pretty sophisticated to get down into that individual homeowner's impact. And this is just to show that for FY20, we had
I'm busy.
projected income sensitivity yield of about 2.36. We're projecting for FY21, it will be 2.41, or about a 2.4% difference. So I realize that this is quite a bit. I mean, we've talked about what we are looking at as far as base expenditures after healthcare mandates, what the net spending is, for per equalized pupil, then what the homestead up here, what the homestead is after incentive before CLA, and so forth. But generally speaking, there's a couple of levers that go into calculating the taxes, and what the impact is on that individual homeowner does take a significant amount of information to then calculate what exactly that impact is going to be.
Brian, thank you. And I had my microphone muted so you couldn't hear my chuckle when you said just a couple of levers. There clearly is a lot that goes into the education side of property taxes. And one of my biggest takeaways from it is that no matter what happens at the school district, you really don't have much control over whether the tax rate that we end up paying goes up or down. Of course, there's some that you have control over, but it does seem like there are a lot of extenuating circumstances that come in and then say to the rest of the community, hey, too bad.
Yeah, we as a community and how we value education and what we want to invest in does have a significant impact on what our eventual tax rate is, most certainly. But it also has a significant impact on our home values as well, which then comes back around and impacts our tax rate. And so it is a process in which there are a number of factors, but I think what's good is that those factors in many ways are controlled by the value of the community, the values of the community.
Mm-hmm. So I'll just ask one question and I'll turn it over to the hands that are up. So in your opinion or your feeling, is there something that the municipality could be doing differently? Thinking of appraisals, is that something where if it were done more frequently than it is, that would be beneficial to the school district and or to taxpayers to have a more of a dollar-to-dollar impact on local decision making versus tax rate?
I mean, it would be, from my experience in seeing where the state is, most people wait until they cross the 80% threshold, which is then a requirement to start to plan a reappraisal, and then sort of a final floor of 70%. So, I mean, I think it's a costly endeavor. I think it's a complex and involved endeavor. So it probably does make some sense to stay with a statistical analysis that gives us some kind of fair market. So I would say that the dollars would be spent somewhere better than doing, because even if you did it for every 3 years opposed to every 8 to 10, you're still going to be impacted some way by it. Recognize that when you do have a reappraisal, you're almost certainly going to find yourself at 105 or 109, or so then the homestead tax rate actually declines from its original calculation because your CLA is quote unquote overvalued to what the statistical analysis is.
That makes sense. Thank you, Brian. So I think the order I saw these go were Patrick, and then Elaine, and then George. Patrick, you muted. One of these days, you'll get it.
I will one day. Thanks, Andrew, and thank you, Brian, for coming in and giving the explanation. One thing that I don't really have any questions about it, but one thing that I did want to point out that I think is a great note, because I hear it quite a bit in this community about how, school taxes keep going up, is that slide that Brian showed from 2014 to today. That tax rate, our administration, along with the merger itself, has managed to bring costs down every single year, I think, except for this one. By merging, there has been a really substantial cost benefit that has come through. Taxes rise. We all know that taxes will always rise. And as Brian's slide show, part of that is linked to the CLA, and that's because, our home values are increasing year over year. The average $280,000 home in Essex that we always quote is probably more like an average $320,000 home these days. So while the taxes go to that, I think it's really good for us as public officials to just note that the school district has done an extraordinary job over the years of not just keeping what they spend for the amount of students that they manage to educate at not just an even rate, but have managed to consistently lower it from where they were, which is just, I think, frankly, an amazing job, considering I think we have probably the best school district in the entire state.
Yeah, I would thank you, Patrick. To that point, I think that chart is very, very telling. I think it's important to point out is that we altered the trajectory so that because of the merger, because of cost savings, we were able to do the merger, because of the incentive that was involved in the merger, we were able to kind of drop to a different trajectory. We are still faced with increasing prices ourselves, increasing prices of labor, continued growth of demand for services. We aren't experiencing what a lot of school districts around the state is, and that is major declines in student enrollment, which is great. That we don't want that to happen. It would severely impact on the quality of our education. But I don't think that we've invented a new way of doing school finance in saying that our trajectory is still most likely going to be an upward trend, but we've been able to change it and kind of fundamentally kind of get onto a different path that has saved the community. I would venture to guess over these kinds of times. I mean, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I guess when I say community, I guess I say the state of Vermont, since this is all a statewide tax. We are a receiving town, though that used to be a term back in the Act 60 days of whether you were a sending town or a receiving town. I think that the number of sending towns are, I think it's under 5 in the entire state. And so the Ed Fund is a significant impact to our community. And the Ed Fund, the sales and use tax and the other ways that the Ed Fund is. And I guess I'd put in now is the pitch of there's no promises for FY22 at this point in time for school budgets or your own budgets that you're responsible for. Well, that is to be determined.
Go ahead, Elaine.
Thank you, Andrew. Brian, thank you for providing us this overview, and I would love to see the slides just so I can look at them again.
Yep.
If you wouldn't mind sharing them with all of us. I have 2 questions. The first is of all the different levers that you indicated in that one map looking slide, how many of them are related to equity in terms of income sensitivity or other measures that find their way into those percentages?
Yeah.
And the second question, which is kind of unrelated, is in terms of the common level of assessment for business versus residential. Is there a difference? Is there a lever there for the municipality? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, thank you for bringing up a question about equity. And I think it shows up in a couple of places. Certainly the one that you mentioned when we look at household income and what people's ability is to pay this sort of pay for this common good. I think equity also finds its way, some probably not enough, in our equalized pupils, because our ADM, our average daily membership, is weighted, and our equalized pupils is weighted to recognize our ELL population, our poverty population, and some other factors that there's a lot of work to be done there, and it began before COVID, but where the state has working with a UVM study on a weighted equalized pupil study. So we'll see where that comes up. There'll be winners and losers in that new equation. When you fundamentally change something, we may see money moving potentially out of Chittenden County and into other places within the state. So, but it's the right thing to do if you believe in sort of the mechanism. I think equity also shows up in our base expenditure budget, and in some ways in our offsetting revenues, because we have Title I services that we provide. Those are directly tied into our free and reduced population for literacy and math support, and we receive both offsetting revenues as well as expenses. So a few places that it shows up, I think is the part there. The second part of the question, Elaine, again?
CLA, the difference with business versus residential.
Yeah. So there's a non-homestead tax rate that is set, and it does have, it is impacted some by the local expenditures, but it's primarily driven on a non-homestead basis by the setting of the from the state level of what the non-homestead is. So there's been efforts sometimes where the state will use their levers to change the income sensitivity yield or the property yield, which can impact the homestead property tax rate, but they may choose not to impact as much on the non-homestead. So that's the business. Also second homes and some others fall into that category. So
thank you.
That's, yep.
George, you're next.
Brian, George, as always, you have a gift for making complexity comprehensible. Thank you. I think I followed it, but if I followed it correctly, one of the things that seemed to ripple through this year was, if I get it correctly, the state mandated healthcare. And so I wonder if you could just explain what that is, one thing. And then just another, and not to put you on the spot by any means, but I always like a sort of a reality check. Just generally speaking, in terms of average student spending and budgets, how do we stack up with our neighbors, with our big neighbors like South Burlington, Williston, and Burlington? Thanks.
So I'm going to start with the first one, and then I'm going to ask you the second one, and then I'm going to ask you to clarify on the first one. So how do we stack up? I think I showed a little bit that math is a bit of a parlor game. You do a lot of dividing into this number and a lot of multiplying of this number. When we start to look at the average cost per pupil or the ed spending per pupil, there's a couple of factors in there that really don't take into full account of what's happening. We contract our transportation, and some districts self-perform it. We run our food service program with our own employees, some contract it. You have special ed costs that are variable based upon the individual services that are going. So understand that when we look at a number and we say, well, Essex is 16 and these guys are 15.5 and these guys are 17, well, then, then Essex is in the middle of the pack. It's not necessarily apples to apples. I mean, how do we compare with our budget increases and our spending per pupil? We're really comparable within Champlain Valley, and Champlain Valley is very different than the rest of the state. And we have different needs, and we experience different things. There's a lot of school districts in the state who aren't carrying the burden of bonding for school facilities, but they're certainly carrying the burden of having very challenging school facilities because their community hasn't been in support of that, so that they haven't gone to them with that. But it also means that their budget is sort of artificially lowered because they're choosing a deferred maintenance approach to manage their tax rate, opposed to someone like ourselves and our peers in Chittenden County, who fortunately our community supports, proactive maintenance and care. So I'd say relatively we're in the same pack as Champlain Valley. We're different, and it really, all the things that add into that number matter. And your first point, George?
You talked about early on. You said one of the differences that had happened, as I understand it, was a state mandated health. And I just wonder if you could clarify what you mean by that.
Yep, it actually goes back a couple of years now, in which there was some concern of healthcare costs and what local communities were burdened with because of all the individual districts negotiating with their unions. And if you recall, there was a pronouncement made that if we did it differently, we'd save $28 million. That was heavily negotiated, and eventually we started to have money taken back by the state in anticipation that we should have saved some money. It all resulted in legislation that created a unified negotiation for healthcare for all employees across the state, with the idea that it was going to save money. For us, it will cost us, that 370 is approximately 6 months of costs, but we anticipate it will cost our district about $800,000. That new negotiated plan, and will probably be increasing at even if we use a reasonable inflation for healthcare, would be increasing at least 10% per year.
Is it appropriate for me to say, wow? That's interesting. So this was the state coming up with a really good idea that were the impacts of this felt equally across school districts, or I'm guessing they fell hard on some and lightened the burden on others. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, maybe I'll hold and let Patrick share.
I think I can be a little freer about it than Brian can, maybe, because I'm not on the school board anymore. But yeah, I mean, I think that this was proposed a few years ago as an idea to save money, and with the understanding as well that negotiating a healthcare contract locally amongst school boards is difficult and time consuming. We don't do that here. We have an HR person, in Travis, but school boards do that work. If we didn't have Kim Gleason, who puts in, enough hours to make a full-time job of it, we would have been in really, I think, rough shape. But we have, some excellent people who do that. Not every school district in the state has someone like that. So a lot of school districts were really struggling with the day-to-day, year-to-year of understanding healthcare, the ins and outs, how complex it is. So the idea or the prospect of a statewide negotiated healthcare package was very appealing. And Phil Scott sold it as that, that as a bundle, the bargaining could be, the cost potential that could be saved is so much better. That millions of dollars figure that Brian mentioned. This is where I'll sort of veer into personal opinion, is that if you're only negotiating healthcare with nothing else attached to it, because this statewide mandate does not apply to teacher salaries, does not apply to the other benefits that they get. It's only healthcare. I mean, you're really limited in how much back and forth you can get. So ultimately, there was not much negotiation between the two sides. And what ultimately happened is the arbitrator said, okay, school districts, give us your last best offer, and then ask the teachers union, give us your last best offer. And the way that the legislation was phrased, they could not choose a middle ground. They had to pick one or the other. And the arbitrator chose the side of the teachers union, which in this case was great for all of the teachers in our state. It is, I would argue, a very, very generous, comprehensive healthcare award. But at that point, local districts had no control over it anymore. So it really was the exact opposite of what I think Governor Scott intended. It was, you know, right. It was not a savings at all for the most part. It was very cost impactful for most districts.
Wow. Fascinating story. Thanks, Patrick. Thank you. That's wow.
Yeah, that's kind of 3 years all summed up into about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But
maybe go back to the negotiating table with that one, I'd guess. The legislature might want to look into that one. Okay, thanks. I don't have any more. Thank you.
I think Andrew's frozen a little bit. I have another question, but I would defer to any other board members who wish to speak first.
Elaine, I just want to jump in. Andrew just texted me. His internet just cut out. Is that true, Andrew? Yeah, he's frozen. So
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Does anyone else have any questions for Brian? Okay. So Brian, I just want to ask quickly. So we received a letter from the Department of Tax saying that the average house in Essex household will see an estimated increase in their education tax of $222 this year. Just checking, making sure that wasn't a typo, wasn't $22, wasn't, you know, so based on what you've explained to us and the calculations that have gone into it that are just labyrinthine, the end result is that increase. And is that something that other towns are experiencing as well?
Well, I have a lot of questions about that letter, and sort of seeing how the words are parsed. Knowing that, you know, 68 to 70% of Essex will pay based upon income. You know, so when we start looking at average, you know, again, it takes about 21, according to the tax department itself, it takes about 21 different factors to determine what somebody's actual tax impact is going to be. So I you know, I have a tough time kind of answering that question because I'm not sure of the construct of how the calculation was. I'm sure that, you know, there are some people who may be over a certain income and have a certain value home, and that home was statistically analyzed to be a certain value, a fair market value, which is different than maybe you and I's home was statistically analyzed to be fair market value. And, you know, you start to work onto the different versions. So, I mean, at a very high level, are other communities experiencing increases of tax rates and tax impact as they are here in Essex Westford? Absolutely. I mean, the statewide increase in any one of the factors, we are well below where the average is in spending, in cost per pupil, in tax rate, homestead tax rate. And we're proud to be there. We're proud to be there because we're taking care of our buildings. We have impactful teaching and learning, and we have safe environments in which, you know, our families can feel secure in giving it. So, you know, opposed to some communities who are really, really proud of a tax rate and really not that proud of the education that getting delivered in their community. So I think we're in the pack.
I appreciate that, and I need to correct myself. The letter we received from the Department of Taxes was the notice of the tax rates.
Okay.
And then we received a subsequent translation of that from our staff saying this is what it's going to equate for an average home. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I
So
think
that-
the whole, oh,
I mean, one of the calculations that happens a lot, and I guess, today's new number is, $288,000 is the average home, and we take a look at that in probably sales prices or on our grand list. So we come up with it, and then we assume that they're one of the 32% that are going to be being paid solely on property taxes. So, those two assumptions are ones that make it hard to say this is what's universally going to happen in your community, because we've landed on, the 288 is probably something in which there may be no home actually valued at 288. There's one at 289 and there's one at 287, and therefore so. I just kind of say that there's a lot of factors that go into what people are going to be paying.
thank you.
Yep. We start up budgeting in about another month for the school district, and we're on Zoom, and everyone's invited, and we'll be talking about things like yield and non-homestead property tax and some of these rates. But I think the more people, Elaine, you asked, I think, on one of your questions, sort of started at like, what can we do as a community or as a municipality? Maybe that was also Andy that said that. We should leverage the fact that we are a magnet community, and we can be more so. The quality of education for generations in this community has been recognized by realtors, by developers, and by families looking to locate themselves in Chittenden County or in the state of Vermont. And we should leverage that. That's how we can get more youth, more families, more new Americans, a diverser population. We can be that magnet because we have strength to build upon. And we just need to, working in partnership with municipalities, I think, great things can happen.
Thank you, Brian. I don't know if we've lost Andrew again. Does anyone else have any questions or comments for Brian? Okay. Brian, thank you so much for your time. I don't know how you managed to keep this stuff straight, but you're clearly an expert at it, and we appreciate your helping us understand what's a really complicated process.
My pleasure. Thanks for all your service. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right.
Brian.
So our next order of business is discussion of staffing needs for consolidated functions. Board members, you will have seen a memo from Evan in your packet. So Evan, why don't you walk us through, and then we can have a conversation.
Well, I will do just a sort of a very quick high-level synopsis. I was asked the costs of delay of merger. Instead of myself just doing this project, I asked all the department heads to give me their views of that cost. So what you see is a compilation, some of it edited to try to fit the size, and not always duplicate thoughts. But so I want to thank the department heads for their responses. There's a couple themes that run through these pages. One, I look at costs in a couple of different ways. One is an actual cost. Do I need another position or positions? Those can be quantified. We know generally what we pay and what benefits costs. Others are the costs of decisions and opportunity costs. And I'm going to go a little bit further into these. So as I mentioned, as you'll see in the memo, some new positions. The number one thing I would say is an assistant village manager. We have Greg Duggan, the deputy town manager. Currently, that position is shared by Sarah Macy as the finance director. we really would like to have her be the full-time finance director working on our finances, and split that assistant manager out to a full-time position to be able to deal with the workload of 2 boards, all the we have several committees and commissions and night meetings, and a lot of other workload that would best be shared by a full-time person in an organization as large as we administer. As there's a couple other ones that are also in there, but this one would be front and center for what is needed. You've heard me all mention many times that we feel we're in an interim condition. You all have been working on this a lot longer than I have been here. You have decided to have joint administration, joint finance, a joint clerk's office, joint HR, joint IT. That is all worked out well, if not exceedingly well, in terms of money saved over those years. Some of the moves that you have yet to finalize are still in that limbo world. And I think one of the things that you will note in from several of the members that responded is a frustration that that work is not complete, which blends into decisions and opportunity cost. I think this is where the cost of delay of merger or no merger in the future is really going to rack up costs in the community. It's not just about 6 months, whether it's November or March or sometime after that. It really starts compounding upon itself about years to 2021 and beyond, because every month that passes is more opportunity lost on a vital decision that got delayed. And these are small things and large things that we just know internally, but are hard to explain outside to the community at large. Let me give you one example. Several years ago, the village and the town agreed that they should consolidate public works. Certain monies have been consolidated into the town budget, but the 2 departments are not merged. They work together, they share things, but they're not merged under one central department head and an organizational structure. That person is Dennis Lutz. One of the key people is Dennis Lutz. He has been slated to retire for, I can't even imagine how long ago he had said he might retire, but he is now going to stay another year, which is great, except if he leaves, I am not clear on what I should be hiring. Am I hiring a public works director for the town and only the town structure that shares and works with the village, or someone who oversees all of those operations, town and village, and makes decisions with an organizational structure underneath him? That has yet to be decided. So that is a decision that hangs out there month after month. Do we combine our capital plans and fund accordingly, instead of the village having its capital needs and the town outside the village capital needs, and then cobbled together funding in that manner? Large capital projects not funded in any one given year would be something like the fate of Sand Hill Pool. For those who may not know, Sand Hill Pool is now 41 years of age. It serves the greater community. It's in okay shape. I wouldn't say great shape, but usually pools don't, need some type of large maintenance like the village pool did, and those are millions of dollars. And so a decision or a direction is needed sometime in the near-term future of what we're going to do about that property and that pool. Do we need one pool, two pools? Do they complement each other? Should they, have some similarities, or should they have some specialties? We have the same thing going on with our public works buildings. Both are about 60 years old each. The villages was a state holdover. That used to be a state building that for when they moved, I believe Village got ownership of that building. It's worked out great, but it's 60 years old and it's not sized for the village of today. It is vastly undersized, and not all of our vehicles fit into the building. And so that's somewhat problematic. And then some of the decisions and the opportunity costs they're just all the way out there, whether it's budgets, taxes, benefits. You just heard from the school district that the state took over their health insurance and it cost them money. Well, I'm guessing mainly because you're trying to find a provider statewide and trying to get so many variables into one plan. For us, this last year, when we got the village and the town into one plan, our projected increase was halved. So we're not quite in that same large state, but we find a lot of savings by being together and bundling between us. And if we don't continue that, some of these costs are really going to rear their heads in many different areas. I think those types of things need to continue, and whether there's a delay or no, not much of a delay, we need to keep finding those advantages. I can go on and on about where those could be found, but one of the other themes inside of this is just the sheer gravity of the staff not knowing whether you're going to merge or not merge, and whether they should do A or B, or nothing. And it kind of puts them in limbo. And so that's sort of thematic. It's not anything like anybody's going to leave us or of that nature. It's just every day. Should we do this? Should we do that? Do we know? That's something we just deal with. I would say that you all have spent a lot of time and effort getting to this point, and the results. If I wish I had Max here, he would have had his slide. I think the number was well over $2.8 million saved. I think that's a good number. It's cumulative. There's other savings that are out there. There may not be as spectacular, but they are cumulative in nature. They play off of each other. And a lot of our future expenses are in the realm of buildings. I mentioned before, are we going to keep and rebuild 2 public works yards? Or would we combine them and only do 1? We have 2 fire stations that are circa 1963-ish, both of them. One we just put a couple $100,000 into because it had mold and other deficiencies. But ultimately, we have these same decisions over and over again. We have the village hall and town hall. We have 2 fire stations, 2 public works yards, 2 libraries. Luckily, recreation has moved together, but they're not merged over at 75 Maple. So those are the opportunities that we really need to focus in on, whether merged or not, and delay doesn't help. And one last thing is there are big impact decisions that if you were working together could benefit the taxation of the community. And one lever that you could look at is the local options tax. But local options tax has been put off as a discussion item because of the need to finish merger and other topics. And that is an opportunity cost on an annual basis. And with that, I will stop talking and answer your questions.
I know I really appreciate seeing that. Thank you so much for the memo. Is anybody else here at feedback when I'm talking?
I don't hear feedback.
I hear you double, Andrew.
Oh.
I'm not sure what that is.
I do hear feedback.
Oh.
Maybe it'll take care of itself.
But I was also going to say I also don't hear your fan anymore.
Yeah, I shut that off. And so I wanted to apologize to the boards for leaving. My internet had cut out twice. I'm not sure what happened. If it happens again, George, I appreciate you taking over. I do appreciate having this information, this memo. It's very detailed, very informative. This is also something where if it could be distilled into something that could be shared with the broader community, I think that would be very helpful during our community conversations as to what does merger mean in a tangible sense. That's one of the things that I do here is what does merger actually mean? And this is a great example as to what that could look like, both in terms of going forward and not. So I really appreciate having this information tied to it. But I don't want to dominate this conversation. Do board members want to jump in here?
And I forgot. I apologize. I forgot to mention this. You guys have heard me say this. Maybe the people on this meeting haven't. We, as a management team, believe merger is the best course of action for the 2 of your boards. We do what we do with all of these night meetings because we do believe in it. And we feel, and Sarah's on this call, Greg is on this call, I think they'll echo this, is we feel the best course of action is forward. There is no interim condition of status quo for the administration. That's the worst place for us, is status quo. Forward gets to finish what you've started, and it gets to equalizing workloads and taking care of the extra night meetings and having the right staffings and a lot of the same things that keep coming up, they're already handled, so they don't come up anymore. We're willing to see this through, but we also very much would love to see the light at the end of the tunnel, as I believe all of the elected officials who are sitting in all of the same meetings we are might think. But also, we put together the agendas. We put together the packets. We have to check on the minutes. We have to post minutes. There's lots of things that go into meeting prep and then post-meeting meetings that maybe some of you are not attending. And so it tends to add to our workloads. And again, happy to do it when we see it moving forward. Get a little grumbly, if that's a real word, when it bogs down. Now,
George, I see your hand is up. Why don't you kick us off?
Right, Evan, I'll echo Andrew's words and probably everyone. I think we appreciate it. And I think that some of the stuff the documents and information you gave us is worthy of discussion, particularly in terms of administration, organization, and so forth. But I do want to say, and I'm just going to state the obvious, that I guess I should put my camera on. Absolutely, we get it, but I think and I'll say this, from an engineering perspective and a management perspective and an efficiency perspective, yes, we just need to move forward and get it all over. But as we are all well aware, there's a political component, and sometimes we tend to be dismissive of the political component as just unnecessary. It's inefficient. It's messy. Why do we have to deal with it? We all work for the people, and we're all trying to figure out what it is that the people want. And that's not an efficient process. That's a messy process. That's a difficult process. And I'm telling you stuff that you already know really well, but all we can say to staff is how much we appreciate. We hear them, at least for me, I'm not speaking for the board. I would say I appreciate, we hear them. Part of the reason I certainly am aware of the stress certainly on village staff, and I have to assume it's the same with the town, which is one of the reasons I think we went forward and tried to put the ballot, on the charter on the ballot in November. But nevertheless, we cannot rush the political process. This is the people, we work for the people, and that's what we just got to deal with. And you're in the public domain, baby. You ain't in business, and so that's it. Doesn't matter.
And George, I'll answer that. We understand that. Okay. It is a matter of getting to the question,
right,
to the people, finding out what the people want, and then adjusting accordingly.
Right. Thanks.
Because that is an answer.
Gotcha. Go ahead, Patrick.
Evan, when I was going through this, and I know that you had a few items on there that were monetary for positions, and I think that you said that a few of them, could wait for budget time, but I'm sure there are others that you probably need even more immediately. If that's the case, is that something that over the next, 2 weeks or so, you could put together maybe some numbers and get those to us so that we as boards could look at them and give you guys some relief, as quickly as we could? I'm sure we're not going to be able to look at every single one of the positions that was listed there and be able to check them off. But if there were one or two that were maybe critical positions to help you and Greg and Sarah out with all these meetings, if we could maybe get that in potentially even before December, then with whether it be with funds that we have left over from unfilled positions, I would, speaking for myself, I would certainly be interested if there were key ones that you feel are necessary for you guys to continue doing your work.
I think we could certainly have it by your next joint meeting.
Yeah, that'd be great. I would love to have that, and I think that the 10 of us certainly would look at very seriously any proposal that came across us that is a request for more assistance, because we know that you guys need it.
I will also double speak here. Also keeping our eye on how tax receipts are being received. You've heard me say this before. It is nice to see that unemployment is coming down from its record highs. There is correlation between unemployment and property tax payments. So I want to be very careful what we do over the next couple of months as we await our tax collections. I just want to be cautious because I do not want to compound one issue with another. But I thank you for the support.
Sure. Well, that's why you put the numbers together and not me picking through that list and
Oh,
deciding
no,
what you need.
you're welcome, but I also listen to Sarah. Thank you.
Select board members, do you have any questions or comments for Evan? If I may, I have a few just observations.
Sure.
And I want to echo, first of all, I want to say a really big thank you to staff, department heads for their honest assessment of how the merger process is impacting their departments and impacting their work, and how the uncertainty of the process is impacting their departments. What I'm hearing, and Evan, you said it very clearly, if we were just looking at it operationally and financially, merger would be the obvious answer. And so I think that bears out all of the research we've done over the last 3 years and all of the calculations we've done. And you guys are reporting that in practice, it is bearing out that it's eliminating duplication, it's increasing efficiency, and it's lowering costs. So from that standpoint, and yes, George, I thoroughly recognize the political implications of merger, but from an operational standpoint and from an affordability standpoint, it's the way to go. And I really appreciate hearing that from the experts in the field who we depend upon to run our town, because we're not running our town. It's the staff of Essex and Essex Junction that run our town. So we really need to remember that. So Evan, budget season is coming. So for myself, I want to use your memo as the basis of priorities for the FY22 budget, and to look at them in a way, look at that budget in a way that addresses these as we can, understanding the implications of COVID on our property tax collection and any other costs that it may have brought onto our budget that we weren't anticipating. And I also want to acknowledge I'm very concerned about the added uncertainty of our merger process, or the added weight that uncertainty puts on staff in terms of their willingness to put up with us as we continue this process. And the longer it gets and the more political it continues to be, I really worry that we're going to lose people. We will lose expertise. We will lose historical knowledge. I don't want that to happen. I don't, I look at the uncertainty and I think, if I were a person that worked in municipal government, would I want to work for a town that can't make up its mind and holds everything in the balance for so long? I worry about that a lot. I just really felt the need to share that. But Evan, I really appreciate the honesty. The frustration you mentioned when I was reading that document came through loud and clear. So I really hope that we can all continue moving forward to answer this question and get some resolution for the staff and the residents.
Yeah, and they're
tired of it too.
We have some long-term employees. This is not their first merger rodeo.
Right.
So they've kind of been through this a couple of times, and I appreciate it. We hire a lot of fantastic people that want to do public good. One of the notes that I noted from the school is we don't see a decline in demand for service. Okay. Yes, while COVID was in it, we had less fire calls, but overall, we do not get less phone calls talking to us about problems in neighborhoods or issues that need to be addressed. In fact, we see more. If you see the population trends of Essex and Essex Junction, we are still growing. I think we put several hundred new people in our community every year. We have to be looking outward into that crystal ball of the future, and what is our population going to be? What is our demand for service? Already, while we were talking merger and having a sidewalk district in the village, we got requests from neighborhoods in the town for that level of service. We get requests from different neighborhoods to see if they can, get their path connected to a different path, so that their kids don't have to do this, that, or the other thing. We look at the quality of our ball fields and the issues of our parks. So those are all things that I think that when we work together, we will find better solutions and better equity for the community as to use and pay.
Andrew,
Hope you enjoyed your reading. It was a lot. and I'm sorry, but again, we all know it's a long haul, and we're really just in the middle, maybe the beginning third of the process, because if you put it on the ballot and if it passes, it doesn't mean it's done. Everything that you ever hoped and dreamed would be done on day one. It's the next phase that has to occur, or phases that has to occur. So thanks for reading it. Thanks for your support. And I will put something together for your next joint meeting.
Thanks, Evan. So select board, I don't see any other hands for the select board. So Andrew, I'll hand it back over for the trustees' comments.
Yeah. Trustees, anything else on this? I think we're all set.
So I'm going to pick up on business item 5C, discussion on draft charter and merger priorities. And this is just to confirm where we are and share some potential next steps and get some consensus if possible. So trustees, I just want to confirm you are moving forward to put your version of the merger charter on the ballot in November. Is that confirmed and correct?
That is confirmed and correct.
Okay, I want to make sure that was a definite thing. Based on our discussion last week, as a select board, we're going to stay the course. So I was happy to hear last week that when we said we wanted to continue working on the document, the trustees expressed interest in staying at the table. So however confusing that may end up to be with a merger ballot, a merger item on the ballot, and you're still sitting at the table, we are still happy to have you there. And we thank you for being willing to continue to work with us on this. I have a checklist of notes, so I'm just going to keep referring to that. So over the last week or so, the select board has reviewed your version of the charter more, in addition to the review we did in preparation for our meeting last week. And in the reading file that Greg brought up today, the amendment, it's included, the beginnings of our continued comments are included. We incorporated all of your comments, and then we made our own. And I also asked Greg to put in the reading file today a list of questions based on select board input, questions for the select board to decide amongst ourselves, and then questions for Dan Richardson. And the questions for Dan Richardson is a longer list, but I think many of the questions are quick answers that he can just help, provide us with the authoritative guidance we're seeking, and then we can move on. And then we identified a couple other areas that we still want to talk to you about. So what I'd like to propose, and I'd like the select board to weigh in on this, in September, I think the select board needs to have a conversation or two amongst ourselves to settle our remaining questions and identify the final 3 or 4 topics that we need to talk to the trustees about jointly. And the other thing I'd like to propose that we do in September is at our joint meeting, invite both planning commissions and the zoning board of authority to come join us and talk about the entirety of the merger document. We haven't talked to them yet. They are a quasi-judicial board that's very important to the operations of the town. And I feel strongly, and George, I believe you agree, that they should come talk to us about their thoughts and help us make sure that we have addressed issues of development, of water and sewer, and any other planning commission related, land development code related topics that we might not have considered. And they may also be a good group to talk to about the proposal for cannabis and tobacco topics in the charter. Do we want to keep that in the charter? Do we want to do that from a zoning basis? What, you know, I really think that that would be a great thing to do. So if we could, select board, are you okay with the idea of having those conversations amongst ourselves and then also inviting the PCs and the ZBA to talk with us as a joint, at a joint meeting? I see Dawn shaking her head. Andy, Pat, Vince, I can't see you, but Vince, are you okay with that?
Yep. Sorry,
Okay.
I was just finishing up some dinner.
That's okay. Great. So trustees, would you be willing to join us at a joint meeting and have the planning commissions and the ZBA talk to us and have a good conversation about those parts of the document?
So trustees, you hear the question. I think Amber is nodding her head. Hang on a second there, George. Dan, Raj, your thoughts?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
George, is this about that specific question?
No, yeah, I'm fine with it too, but I would only stipulate that I would like the trustees to have some specific questions. I mean, I think we want some things just, you know, to give it some focus, that's all. We had talked about having a planning summit, and so I'd like to, you know, I think I raised some questions in there that we all agreed were important questions, so I'd like to maybe make sure that those come to the table if we're going to have a discussion about planning and community development. And I would only comment on what you said, Elaine. I think extending it to sewer allocation might be a little, we might be going a little far afield with that, but it's fine. We could do that too. Thanks.
Basically, I just wanted to toss out every possible topic we might want to just touch on with them. You know, I realize that sewer and water is a little far afield from them. However, it isn't. So I think that that just needs to be a part of the conversation. And I acknowledge that you had wanted a summit and that we had planned on embarking on a whole process of doing this with the PCs and the ZBA and both boards and having community input and everything. COVID hit and we just dropped it. And so I'm sorry that that happened. The timeline has been accelerated as a result of, you know, we can't, the town will not be voting on this in November, but we want to try to do it for town meeting. So we want to keep the process moving by at least honoring the PCs and the ZBA by bringing them to the conversation. I think it's the very least we should be doing, and make sure that they have some input. I would not be surprised if there's considerations that we have not taken into account based on their expertise. So.
Thank you, Elaine. And just one quick thing I wanted to mention as well. In reviewing an email from Susan McNamara Hill regarding the process for us putting this on the village's ballot, it appears that we have actually until the end of the day, September 23rd, to have a finalized charter ready. It does not need to be September 3rd. So we have some time on the village's end to get our version approved of. So happy to work with the select board on trying to engage and trying to really incorporate as many desires as a select board wants, so that way this can be as close to ideal in the select board's eyes as we can get.
That's terrific to know. We had all thought, I think, that we had far less time. I do think, though, that we may not be done by September 23rd, but if your board would not mind looking at the edits that we have made that are in the reading file today, and sending us your comments, you know, we're going to keep going. And yes, let's try to make common ground as much and as often as we can. So thank you for pointing that out. So the other next steps that I just want to suggest and see what folks think about is after September, that October is the time where the trustees and the select board need to settle the few remaining specific significant items that we want to talk about. And my understanding, based on meetings and notes and such, is that there's four, possibly 5 things that we just need to address. Sidewalk district, cannabis and tobacco, representation, which actually depends upon the outcome of what's happening in the House of Representatives right now, so that's kind of on hold. PC and DRB decision, and then the 12-year taxation plan to confirm all that. So based on all of that information that I've kind of gathered from all over, those are the 5 things that we need to come to agreement on. And some of them we may come to agreement before even October gets here. But I'd like to say October is the month where we finalize everything and bring all of our best ideas to the table and finalize agreements on all those things that are going to be in the charter, so that in November, the select board can go to the public and say, here is a draft of what both boards have agreed to, and let the public read it in its entirety, let them ask questions, and we have some online interactions with the public, we have some public hearings, we listen to their comments, so that by the time Thanksgiving comes, we can all go home and have some turkey, and then as soon as December gets here, we adjust it based on whatever significant public input we receive. You know, if something's pointed out that's like a real something we overlooked that's really significant, we fix it, we tweak whatever we need to tweak, and in December, both boards, or the select board, hopefully, would take a vote on this merger charter going to the ballot on town meeting day. And then we can hand it to the clerk, and she will have the necessary time to get it prepared for the ballot. And we can spend January and February with outreach and education. So that's what I'm proposing, and I'd like to hear what select board members in particular have to say, because this is pretty much the roadmap for the select board that I'm suggesting. And then if trustees have any further input, but I'd love to hear what the select board thinks.
Yeah, I think that's a good timeline for us.
Okay. Andy?
It's good to hear that there's additional time for the trustees to finalize what they're going to put forward. I think there may be a lot of the little things that potentially could be addressed there. I think that would be very helpful to get those out of the way. Yeah. And so and so I do agree with the proposed timeline. I'll leave it at that.
Great. Dawn or Vince? No, I'm not hearing from Dawn or Vince. I'd love to see a head shake, thumbs up, a comment. It's really...
I am perfectly fine with that timeline.
Okay, great. Thank you, Vince. Dawn is waving. Okay. So just going to reiterate that again, just really quick. We're going to have select board meetings in September to finalize the edits and questions that we have, and hopefully Dan Richardson will be able to come talk to us during that time. We will have a joint meeting with the trustees, the PCs, and the ZBA. In October, we will have time with the trustees to finalize the 4 or 5 more significant issues to make sure that they're okay. November, we will talk to the public. December, we'll vote on it, whether or not it goes to the ballot, and if it does, we will give it to the clerk. January, February, we will do outreach and education for a town meeting vote on merger, March 2021. Okay. Andrew, is your hand up again, or is that a legacy?
It is up again. I just wanted to state the obvious with the timeline that after September 23rd, we, the trustees, will already have, or we will have a charter put forth to the community that the village will be voting on come November. So that will also be a very important thing to keep in mind in the timeline, because how that turns out may have some impact in terms of what the charter may look like. And additionally, in terms of possible changes from the community, if they're really big, those are some things to keep in mind.
You're absolutely right. I need some help understanding a few things here, because it's going to be an up or down vote. If it passes, we won't know why. If it fails, we won't know why. And so while it's really important that we come to agreement on the important things, whatever it is that the village ends up voting on is unlikely to be what the town's going to want to vote on, what the select board's going to approve to put on the ballot, which is why last week I was so strident in asking you not to do this so that we could have common ground all the way through. So my expectation is that the charter that the select board approves is going to also have to be, if you vote and approve your merger charter in November, the select board has two choices. We could either put that exact charter on the town meeting ballot, which is what I think the expectation is, or the hope is, but based on our work to date, we have not reached common ground on all of it. So what you're going to put on the ballot in November is not the same as what we are going to put on the ballot in March. So therefore, our boards are going to have to agree, and the village residents are going to have to vote again. And I see disagreement there, and I'm not sure how we're going to work through it, although I'm confident we will. But it's a worry I have for sure, because it's an inconsistency that we're asking our voters to deal with that I wish we weren't.
The only thing I want to add to that is you're not incorrect. You're stating the truth. That should so the only thing I want to slightly change is if the select board does change the charter to be voted upon on town meeting, the village doesn't have to vote again on a charter. If it passes, what could always happen is the village's version could go to the House Government Operations Committee. The town's version can go to the House Government Operations Committee. So you don't have to have the village vote again.
That's right.
I just want to point that one procedural part out. It's not, I don't want this to come off as I'm putting my fist up and we're not doing this, because that's not the point. I
appreciate that, because I think residents are thinking, well, wait, the village usually gets to vote twice on stuff. So
I just wanted to point out that one very technical aspect of this that could also be a reality.
Yeah. Dawn, your hand has been up. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to ask the trustees a question. In your wording for your ballot, are you just going to ask the village if they want to merge? Or are you asking them to merge and accept the new charter?
I believe the phrase is to accept the plan of merger.
And so you're including your new charter in the plan of merger. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
George?
Yeah, Elaine, I just want to point out, I don't have a really, on the surface, don't have a problem with your schedule, but I think as we said last week, part of the reason we're doing this is we want to have a conversation with our constituents in the village. And that, that's kind of a priority. It's a priority for me. And I'm not at all trying to be provocative with what I'm about to say. But with the 3-3 ballot change, I think we could all agree that the town has had an ample conversation with the select board about the town's priorities. We would like to have the time and the space to have that kind of a conversation with our village citizens. So I just want you to keep that in mind. That's a priority. That's a component here, as I think Andrew is getting at, that's important to us. We've been kind of very focused on 3-3 and what's the seating arrangement on the proposed merger charter. That seems to be a really hot topic. It's not such a hot topic in the village. I think we've got other topics we need to discuss. So I'd like to just throw that in to make sure it's understood as we go forward with any schedule. At least from my perspective, I want to have that conversation with the village, and that's a one-on-one conversation with, in my view, with the trustees and the village population. I hope you can appreciate that. And I'm not trying to be the least bit, in my opinion, I'm not speaking for the rest of the trustees, but to me, that's a priority. Okay.
I completely respect that, and I understand it, and I agree. You're 100% right. You should be having that conversation with your constituents. Somebody needs to turn off their microphone because the echo is horrible. But yeah, George, I really appreciate your being very specific about that. And I think everyone on the select board does understand, like you have to talk to your constituents. We are totally fine with that. I'm just trying to plan ahead and consider what we need to do in the meantime. And also acknowledging that the trustees have offered to stay at the table even after that charter is approved to go on the ballot. So we're sending multiple messages right now, and I'm really happy that we're all still working together, and I'm confident we'll figure it out.
We will. We'll figure it out.
Thank you. That was all I had for that. Evan and Greg, is there anything about what we just decided that gives you pause or have concerns about?
No, just depends on whatever else happens in the world during those months. But no, as long as you guys continue to talk and we get the answers that we need from Dan Richardson. In September, the second, I believe it's September 28th, we're supposed to get the presentation from Sarah Macy about separation. What I want to caution all of you on is it is not easy doing these presentations, these numbers. If you want to get finished, I would have her do her presentation. It's for information purposes only, and in a conversation with Dan Richardson, he understands that the charter format was done by staff. It may or may not have been the way he would have done it, but he will clean it up. And so if there are some inconsistencies or language that needs to be legalese, he will do so. But he just needs the bigger constructs of what you're trying to achieve, and he'll write it accordingly. But just be on your guard not to add significant time issues that are going to take staff a lot of time to do research. We really, at this point, it's really what's on your charter now that needs to be focused on, not a lot of what ifs.
Thank you, Evan, for reminding us of that. We need that reminder.
I have to say it that way. Just keep the what ifs down.
Yeah. Will do. Thank you. There's a question out in the public. With the board's approval, I think this might actually be a good time to invite the public to comment. Okay. So if you wish to comment, members of the public, you know the drill. You can raise your hand in your toolbar. You can mention that you want to speak in the chat, or you can wave into the camera. So we have Annie and then Patty. Oh, Evan, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I've asked you this, and I'll mention this. When we do public comment, it's people making a comment. It is not a dialogue. And so if you've spoken, I would appreciate that, people responding to what somebody else has said is just keeps going on, that we try to limit people from let them have their comment, but not a dialogue. Thank you.
Understood. And I see that Kathy Ainsworth has raised her hands. Do you have a technical question that we need to work on, Kathy?
I just want to make sure that anybody who's speaking, this did come up before. there are times when I don't have the full name of the person speaking. So if we could make sure before you say anything, the public says anything, that they state their full name, and also that the public keep in mind that I don't quote people, that I take I do my best to try to get the spirit of the comments, but if I were to quote everybody, it would be a very lengthy process, and it's not the way in which recordings via a secretary work. So, thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. It's minutes, not a transcript.
Right.
Okay. All right. So Annie, Patty, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Brian Sheldon the other day did such a great job of language towards the chair and the president. Chair Haney and President Brown.
Those are our titles. Madam Chair and Mr. President also work.
Great. Thank you. Please, will you extend my gratitude to Kathy for all her hard work? My name is Annie Cooper. I am a town resident, also in the village. So what I'm thinking of is let's take an extreme, because I work that way. Let's take an extreme example of voting in November on the village ballot. And let's say we have some kind of 100%. I'm kidding. But let's just take a really high number of yes to that merger as it's laid out with the model of governance. When I vote again in March as a town resident, because whether both boards put this on the ballot for November at the same time, or we do it like this, I'm just making it clear for the public, I get to vote as a village resident and as a town resident. So I'm going to vote twice, whether I do it in November and March or all at once together in November or March. So when I'm voting, if I vote yes to merger on the 331 model, and then we have half a population that just voted yes to merger on the 331 model, when I'm standing in the voting booth or at my house or whatever, and I'm deciding about my vote on the select board presentation of governance model, I'm going to be in struggle, not about merger, but about agreeing to a governance model that is markedly different than what I believe in my heart should exist. And so I am tasked as a resident to determine a strategy as an individual resident, not even somebody who might be as informed as I am. I'm struggling to decide now, when I'm voting in March, what does this mean for me? Do I still want merger in this way? And I am concerned that, number one, if the select board sees that half of its population wants a 331 model, almost unanimously, of course, I'm making an extreme model. What does that mean for you? What are you going to consider? Because you're going to get some very frustrated people asking for this other model, the same way you had frustrated people asking for the 3-3 model. You just haven't heard from the village yet, quite frankly, because the village does what the village always does, which is politely move along and try to make things work. And I don't, sorry, that sounded very, that sounded inappropriate. Hang on, I'm sorry. Please forgive my language. I'm saying that I don't think that there's been enough noise from the village to the select board, because there's this tendency to not recognize that the whole select board is for us to also go talk to. And so I don't know that the select board recognizes that we're half your constituency, you know, and so I just feel a concern for all of us, literally, for the entirety of all of us, for both boards, for the residents, for everyone, about what it's going to be like when my pen is hovering over that ballot for the word merger with this governance model and this one. And I think it's important for the select board to understand that number one, I'm not sure if the trustees were not putting this on the ballot in November, if you would be pressed into March or you would put it off for 2 more years. I'm sorry if I'm being rude. I'm not sure it's true. So I think that the absoluteness of the thing going on the ballot is not bad because it's making us all pay attention. And then secondarily, this governance model disparity is very important to recognize and to pay attention to for both boards. And I thank you for your time. I've gone on too long. Thank you.
Thanks, Annie. Patty?
Yes, I'll keep it short and sweet. I think it's just human nature that we should, whatever groups, whether we're 2 wards, 3 wards, 4 wards, we should all have control. We all want control. Village wants control, town wants control. That's why we have issues. So we need to work it out. And my only statement is, all I ask is that we respect our select board chair's wishes to support us here in the town. She's doing a great job representing our wishes. And yes, it's encouraging us to research and the best we can. But if Sarah Macy definitely wants to come out with those numbers, September 28th, I think that would be great to see as a possibility. It's not that I want to separate, but just to compare, because we want control of the place where we live. That's the bottom line. It's nothing else. There's no animosity. It's just we want our own control. Just like we control our own bodies, we can control our own health. We want control. That's the bottom line. So that's all. The only other thing I wanted to say quickly is that I have to admit, only living here 4 years, I was confused not knowing that the recording secretary was just for the select board. I thought maybe because there's so many little things that we're so-called sharing, which I think is great, that SAS plan, that I don't even know, and maybe it'd be nice to have it documented on a sheet of paper, all the shared services that we do have, and like our town manager said, because if the public knows what they are, what's shared and what's not, like there's a secretary for the town select board, there's a secretary for the village trustees. I didn't know that. I mean, we can help you help us. The more information you can give us, to keep it simple, just on one sheet of paper, numbers for what the town pays in, numbers what the village pays in, what services are shared, and that's it. Then we'll have more control. That's all we want. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak? I see 2 more hands, Diane Clemens and then Irene Renner.
Okay, so my comment is, after listening to what I heard, is that the document that was presented earlier about how the stalling of merging is an opportunity cost to our community is quite distressing to me. I'd like to see our community rowing in the same boat at the same time in the same direction. Now, I am distressed also that I have to weigh the philosophy of positive effects that merger will have with the debate of the plan of merger, which may or may not be in the best interest of the entire community or either half as we see it at the moment. And that plan of merger needs to be very descriptive and very easy to read and understand by anyone in this community. So it is to everyone's advantage that that is very easy to understand. If I read anything in any of the media that I've seen, it is very imperative that we make this readable, because people are not, they're reading all kinds of things into it, but it's not plain spoken, and it doesn't necessarily speak to everyone. I am having a hard time with the fact that merger may be, I think, in our best interest as the whole, but the plan, I think, is not going to help anyone straight out of the gate. Thanks.
Thanks, Diane. Go ahead, Irene.
Thank you, Irene Renner. Just a couple of bullet points for all of you because I know it's getting late. I heard a few people earlier say we need to go forward and that the word forward translates into merger. And I would respectfully say that we've been going in circles toward merger since 1958. Perhaps forward does not mean merger. Perhaps forward means something else. I also heard people suggest that we need to find out what the people want. It's not just about the financial and operational ideals, it's what people want. So I would draw your attention back to a survey that we spent a lot of taxpayer money on last summer, where, for example, 62% of the people wanted ward representation. And yet, in the interim 12 months, I've seen all kinds of people in high positions speak against district representation, work against representation by district. And that's concerning to me because we have heard what people want, and yet we're not going forward with what people want. I also heard someone talk about how our reputation as a town is affected by the fact that we're voting on merger, but it might not pass. I would respectfully suggest that anyone who moves here, moves into town to buy a house, moves into an apartment, or even takes a job with the town of Essex or the village of Essex Junction, they haven't done their homework if they don't already understand that what we do is go in circles about merger. I also heard that all roads lead to merger from a financial and operational standpoint. And I would also respectfully say, if all roads lead to merger, how come we haven't gotten there by now? Maybe we need to examine the jalopy we're driving. Maybe we need to make sure there aren't other roads that are shortcuts to something else. And so it really concerns me that the mention of the separation statistics that are coming at the end of September seem to be an afterthought to the timeline that was presented tonight, rather than an integral part of them. Because I would like to think that getting new information might change directions or change the conversation or change the public's perception of where we're headed. And finally, let's please be clear that unlike all the other past merger and separation votes that we've had, this one does have a new twist. We have seen our schools merge, and we as parents have watched busing disappear. We've watched kids have to walk on busy roads because their sidewalks aren't plowed and they no longer get buses where they expected to get them. And so people, I would respectfully suggest, are absolutely more cautious about merger than ever, because while you can change the town and village's trajectory of expenses, just the way EWSD has done, if that trajectory change to save them money impacts something as much as busing has impacted every single family in this town outside the village and town inside the village, we're going to have a big problem selling merger. No one should ever have to sacrifice something as big as these parents and students have had to in the past couple of years. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. One more comment from Annie Cooper, and then we have just a few more things on our agenda.
Thank you. I just, while the separation numbers are coming and I've been on the fence about merger, I'm just feeling more comfortable this evening. I meant to say it earlier, but it was not public to be heard after Evan's presentation, and thank you to staff. But after hearing that presentation, I just feel more comfortable about the direction that merger is going and the conversations we're having, and I thank you all for your hard work. I meant to say that earlier. Thank you.
Thanks, Annie. Okay. At this point, we have business item 5D, which is appointment of joint Essex Housing Commissioners, which will require an executive session. So usually what we do in that case is we move that to the end of the meeting and continue on to finish our other business. So item 6 is consent items. Would anyone from the select board like to move to approve the consent agenda?
Hey, this is Vince Franco. I move we approve the consent agenda.
Thanks, Vince. Sorry you've been having connectivity problems.
Oh, no worry. The old phone still works.
Thank you. Is there a second? And Vince, mute yourself, Vince.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion from the select board?
Who was the second, please?
Second was Patrick.
Thank you so much.
Vince, please mute your phone.
Sounds like sonar.
That really hurts.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay, we've approved the consent agenda.
Trustees.
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Dan. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Passed unanimously. And it looks like that
Okay.
would bring us into the reading file. Start off, trustees, any comments? And George, go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry to jump right in, but I do, and I'm sorry, and all Evan's staff under pressure information notwithstanding, we do have a little bit of an issue here. If we're going to have a conversation with our village constituents, Andrew, and the trustees, and we're going to give them information, I think we're probably going to need a breakdown of village and town taxing and expenditures before September 28th or 23rd. In fact, we're going to need it a lot sooner. I'm wondering if we could expedite that. We don't need projections of grand list growth or maybe a lot of other things that you're thinking of adding. I think just a breakdown of where the money comes from, where the money goes, would be helpful. If that could get to us before the end of September, would be helpful. Just going to add that. If not, we can probably patch something together based on annual reports and our own understanding of the budget. Thanks.
I wonder if we could get a sneak preview at the trustee meeting on September 22nd, and without being able to look directly at Sarah to get any kind of a confirmation. Maybe that's just a hope for now. Dan, go ahead.
So to speak to that, what George just brought up in the numbers for the cost for the community inside the village, or the village, I should say, and the town outside the village. Along those lines, I think we really need to make it apples to apples what exists now. You can get the numbers possibly roughly close to what it's costing the village, by themselves, if we separate, and the town outside the village by themselves. But to be consistent, to have a third number would be to have the town outside the village realize the situation that the village is in, which would be a number where they're separate, but then they also pay a portion of the tax to the village. That's the existing situation right now for village residents. So I'm just saying that if you really want to be apples to apples, that's separating and having the town outside the village pay for all the services in the town outside the village, and then pay a small portion to the village for certain, just saying, there's many ways to look at this thing, but I don't, I'm not saying we have to go down that road, but just so people have numbers.
Thank you, Dan. Any other trustees? Okay, the only thing I wanted to mention, trustees, is at the end of this joint meeting, we have a scheduling question that we could stick around for the end of the joint meeting. If we could just solve that then, that'd be great. Elaine, go right ahead.
Select board members, any comments on the reading file?
I have no comments.
Thank you. I just have a couple things. I want to say thank you very much to Jill Evans from the CJC for providing that data on direct referrals. It's really helpful information to have. And I'd like to thank Travis for providing us with the information about the Blue Cross Blue Shield and MVP increases, always important to know. And finally, thank you, Representative Mary Beth Redmond and Representative Bob Bancroft, who the letter from Mary Beth to the House Government Operations Committee is in our reading file. Today, Representative Bancroft also sent a letter to the House Government Ops Committee, and board members have received that in a separate email because it arrived just today. But I just wanted to thank them for their efforts on the town's behalf. That was it. Just wanted to dole out some thanks. So regarding the executive session for appointment of the Housing Commission, as I have throughout the process, I'll be recusing myself from this discussion as one of the candidates is a colleague of mine, so I will not be participating in the executive session, but I will sit out here and wait patiently for you to complete your deliberations, and I'll be here when you come back. Andy?
I guess the question I have is, how are we going to do this since it's a joint commission? Do we vote separately or together? How are we planning to do that? I just want clarity.
My understanding is that you will be working on a slate of candidates in executive session. And then my assumption is that each board would vote on that slate.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Vince, could you mute your mic, please? Thanks. Andy, you are our resident executive session motion maker.
We've got the motion up here. I move that the select board enter into executive session to discuss the proposed public official appointments in accordance with 1 VSA section 313A3 and to include the unified manager and deputy manager.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Any further discussion?
I just need to know how I go from here to there.
Pardon me?
I need to go. How do we get from this meeting to executive session?
You will have been sent a link by Tammy for a second Teams meeting that's happening. It should be on your calendar and you can join it from here. So you're going to move into that meeting, and when you're done, you'll come back to this one.
You got to hang up on this one and then rejoin later. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Wow, whose thing is that? This is really.
I swear it's not me. I'm on a headset.
Oh, sorry, Vince. Okay.
Okay, so I think the select board, you guys just made the motion, right?
Yes, we're done.
Have not voted yet.
Oh, we've not voted yet. All those in favor of executive session, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you.
All right, trustees. Somebody want to make the same motion? Am I on mute or did nobody hear me?
I don't know.
Can I just say ditto?
Why don't you say same thing for the trustees?
Same thing for the trustees.
Thank you, Raj.
All right. Can't find it.
It's all good. Does somebody want to second that?
Second.
Thank you, Dan. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that passed. See you on the other side.
I'll keep the meeting.